Well, good evening. And thank those of you who said those nice words about me and things. And that's a whole lot better than before. I came here tonight, I got a text. I belong to we have a prayer group back home in Round Rock. And one of the people in the prayer group sent me a text shortly before I was coming here tonight. And his text said, "Just don't embarrass us, okay?" So I said, it's nice now to have a nice welcome to come in after his, but I said, I think it did the job, however, though. So anyway, I'm going to start this evening and say, first of all, I can't begin to express to you how wonderful it feels to be back here. To be back here where actually the faith journey began, where it all began. Nativity was our home here for probably over the 10 years that we lived here in Dubuque. We lived down the hill in the big blue house with the windows across from Lawrence College. Our three girls all went to grade school here. And I made my first weekend, Christian Experience weekend, right here at Nativity Parish. Now, I wish I could say, however, that I made that weekend as a willing participant, but that would probably not be a very accurate statement. Besides, there's probably some of you out there that would know for sure that that statement was far from the truth. But we all start our faith journey somewhere. And it's usually not always because we decided that we should become more connected with God. Usually something dramatic happens in our life, or someone else sparks that first spark to start digging into our faith. And for me, it was someone, or I could say many someones, that I felt, or that they thought I should make a weekend. And I finally did. I wasn't really sure why everyone thought I needed to go on a weekend, but I finally said okay, and I said, okay, I'm going, and I said, I wish I could say that that's the rest of the story, but it was really only the beginning of a very long journey of learning that continues to evolve, even now as I stand before you tonight. So on to my topic, as was so talked about, will you miss me when I'm gone? And you're probably thinking, well, that's a good topic to ensure that you will miss me when I'm gone. It's set in there to keep you focused on that, because now that I've told you to. But actually, this is a phrase that I heard early on in one of my first CEW weekends that happened here at Nativity. And yes, I did make another weekend after that first weekend as a candidate. And I even went on to eventually be a rector of the weekends. But that statement caught my attention then, just as it did when it resurfaced a couple of months ago, when one of our coworkers at work asked me, we were standing there, and she said, so do you think when we're gone from work or when we're sick, do you think people ever miss us from those situations? You know? And I said, and did they miss us for a reason other than the fact that they had to do our work while we were gone? And I said, well, that's probably an interesting idea. And I said, the first time I heard it, though, that I heard that statement, it was actually in reference to an idea that people should mourn our death and miss us when we are gone. And if they don't, did we really matter? It reminds me of the statement that Padre Pio said about his life when he was alive. I will be louder in death than in life. And if you know anything about the life of Padre Pio, you will know that to be true. A couple of years ago, I went to Mass at St. Giovanni Rotondo in Italy, the sanctuary of Padre Pio, where he is known for his healing of his ministry of the sick. And he was declared a saint in 2002. There are two churches on the site, and the original one was built in 1918, and the present one they built shortly 2 or 3 years ago, and it holds 6,000 people. On the Sunday that we were there attending services, both churches were full to capacity. And as we were told and came to understand it, that's a regular occurrence, that there are over that number of people attending regularly at that church. So I think we could definitely say that he is louder in death than he was in life. But before my first CEW weekend, my faith life was what you might call a minimalist. I was Catholic probably more in name than I was in substance. I was what you might call a Catholic on the outside. I went to church on Sundays, I went to communion, I went to reconciliation, I made it to holy days when it was convenient, and I helped out where I could at church, which was not a really huge commitment either. And I only did all of those actually if I had time, which wasn't often. But on the inside, prayer life, spending time with God, reading about my faith, that would have been a zero. Didn't happen, and didn't really know it should happen either. Most of my faith formation was spent on learning how to avoid going to hell rather than how to go to heaven. So with that said, my faith life consisted mostly of me making sure I didn't commit any mortal sins, which would send me to hell. So not sure about working towards the idea of, will you miss me when I'm gone? I had a singular relationship with God. When I needed something, I went looking for God, and when things were good, God was kind of on the back burner. The idea of a faith life that involved community, prayer, support, action, the three stools, the three legs of the stool, these were all new words to me. The idea of building a relationship with God was really a new concept. I thought I was doing good with just bargaining when I needed something. I would promise to say a couple of rosaries or special prayers if I wanted to pass a test or any number of other daily requests. But I really thought I was doing okay. After all, I was Catholic, right? I was good, right? So I really didn't know why I should attend or need to attend a Christian retreat, a Bible class, or any other program being offered. And who would miss me anyway? Well, as I came to find out on that weekend, I really didn't have a relationship with Christ in which I could say I really knew him and had faith in him. I had learned at a very young age that life can take some really bad turns. From the time I was around 5 years old, I sensed that my dad's health was tenuous. Ambulances would come to the house and I would be sent upstairs, or it was late and I was already upstairs. I would try to listen to the heat grates on the second floor to hear what was going on, wondering if my dad would be there in the morning. When I was about 7, my uncle died at the age of 48. And I overheard my mom talking to her sister saying she thought she'd be the first. And I wondered, the first what? When I was 15, my dad did take another trip to the hospital. And that time, he didn't come home. Lots of lessons about loss were being learned, but nothing in them taught me anything about God, faith, or trust. Many years later, I married the love of my life, Dick Phillips. We were married about 2 years and expecting our first child when the Vietnam War and the draft was happening. There was a shortage of eligible men for the draft, and all the exemptions became void, as he had an exemption for teaching and those became void. And if a lot of you might remember, a lottery was put in place. And Dick drew a really low number, 225, and we still remember that number to this day for the Vietnam draft. But he was lucky. He got into the National Guard prior to his number coming up. And we thought, oh good, you'll be close to home, so this isn't going to be really a problem. And he got his papers and he got sent to Fort Ord, California. Not very close to home. I worried he may not come back, as we really didn't know what was going to happen with this war. So you lived in some kind of fear and in suspense, wondering day to day what was happening. While he was at Fort Ord, we had the first of our 3 amazing girls. His brother, however, didn't fare as well. He came home from the war, but came down with cancer shortly after, which we now know was caused by Agent Orange, and he also left this world way too young. Again, lessons learned. But where was God? And then on that first weekend here at Nativity, I learned that life is full of loss, as well as lots of happiness, and many people shared their stories with me. I learned that what made their losses easier to deal with was that they shared experiences with other people. My mind and heart opened up on that weekend, and my toes touched the edge of the ocean to see if I could actually trust and share myself with others. I had spent a lot of years putting up walls so as not to get too close to people, because then I wouldn't feel any pain if they left, because I never was close. But after my first weekend, I became more involved with our faith community. I met weekly with a prayer group. I continued to read lots of books, study, and became involved in CEW at our parish. I had come a long way from my first weekend experience. I was learning how to have faith in God and trust that with God, all things are possible and bearable. And then life took a bit of a different turn for us and our family. Dick's position at his work was cut back to an income level that we knew wouldn't sustain us in our present surroundings. I was in the process of closing a business, and we needed to find new sources of income. Our faith community, right here in this church, prayed for us, and we knew that God would provide answers and new jobs. What they didn't realize is that their prayers would be answered only by Dick finding a new job in a parish in Austin, Texas, a very long way from Dubuque, Iowa. But after many tear-filled gatherings, we all accepted that God was calling us to Texas. For what? We didn't know, but it surely was God's will. That faith community provided the cost of a truck to move our belongings, paid extremely high prices for items we sold from our home. They spent days packing boxes. They provided food for the whole week before we left, and also a truck full of soul food for the trip. I don't know if our community missed me when I was gone, but I certainly missed them. And when we reached Austin, Texas, little did we know that another community would be waiting for us on the driveway of our rented house. Even in the heat of July, and I think it was something like 103, very different from here, there were new friends in Texas. And they unloaded what seemed like a never-ending stream of belongings. A new community. And they were right. This was God's plan. But it only took a year after settling into our new community that Dick and I began to realize that we missed our faith community from Iowa, and that it was difficult to make friends in a 2,000-plus family parish. We needed faith friends, and then we wondered if maybe starting a CEW community in Texas would maybe help us feel at home. So with the help of our previous faith family here in Iowa, and those of you that did know who you are, we began and those very people who helped us unload our truck in Texas, every one of them, God does work in mysterious ways, we gathered together a team to help make CEW begin in Texas. This was certainly a new step in faith development, in my faith development. It's one thing to share your stories with a known group, but to go out and start something new in uncharted territory, this took a different level of faith commitment and action. This was a long way from that first weekend experience here at Nativity. But it was those seeds that were planted and nurtured. From our move to Texas, I developed a new relationship with God. And I also learned that God calls us to discipleship. And when I actually respond to those words, as we heard tonight, "Here I am, Lord," the tools necessary for the journey are forthcoming. Faith in action, yet another new dimension of my faith journey. What we really believe needs to be lived out in the world. My faith at that time of starting a CEW weekend was one of sharing what I had learned. I wanted to give back what I had been given so freely from many of you here. We continue to help parishes in the area start CEW, as we believe that this is a wonderful conversion experience weekend, and it helps people to learn more about their faith and God's love for them. And in addition, it's a way to meet and create a community right within your own parish. And during this time of starting the weekends, one of which was at our new parish in Georgetown, where Dick began working about 5 years after moving to Texas, we became part of a prayer group with members from St. Helens in Georgetown. And we have been meeting with this group every other week now for over 11 years. Every time we think about how long we've been together, all 8 of us, we celebrate the fact that we continue to do this. This is where the real growth in faith takes place. Around that table, as we share our faith stories, that continues to help our doubts, fears, and shared experiences. From our shared experiences, being challenged about whether I was doing enough, came the thought that, will I be missed when I'm gone? I continue to have questions about deepening my faith, and how does that happen? What is the potential depth of relationship with God? I'm still trying to deepen my faith and put faith into action. Among our faith community at St. Helens was a wonderful couple, Dick and Susie Stone. Susie gave several inspiring talks on the retreat weekends as she herself was really involving in her faith journey. She is a member of Mensa, you know, that club for really smart people. So conversion or conversations about God with her were usually pretty deep. But her husband Dick couldn't have been more different. He was kind of a fly by the seat of your pants type of person, and so was his faith. But Susie had become a victim of seizures, and doctors had tried almost everything to control them. She is a strong spirit, however, and still went running, even though she'd have a seizure, fall, and get hurt. One day, however, she decided it would be okay to drive to the pool and drop the kids off at the swimming pool. And since it was only just a mile. The doctors didn't really want her driving due to the seizures, but Susie felt that she was doing much better as of late, and did drive short distances to her husband Dick's dismay. I worked downtown at that time in Austin, and one day while I was out getting some lunch in a magazine during my lunchtime away from work, I got a call from my husband saying that Susie had been in a serious car accident with an 18-wheeler and was being airlifted from Georgetown to a hospital in downtown Austin, close to where I worked. Dick said I needed to go there and see how she was and what was happening. Now, if you remember my initial story about loss, a lot of those losses involved hospitals, and the idea of going into a hospital always did and still does unsettle me. As this request sounded like an experience I didn't need that day, I asked why he just didn't come down, as I should go back to work. He wouldn't give in and said I needed to head there right away. I called work. I said I wouldn't be back due to emergency, and then got to my car to make my way over to the hospital. My heart was pounding for several reasons. What was I going to find out about Susie? And would I be okay in the hospital? I talked with God on my way over and asked, what am I to do? What am I to do? Traffic in Austin is crazy. And going places where I didn't really know I was going was sometimes kind of difficult, and that even provided more of a struggle. So during that drive, my mind was probably going in a million different directions. Finally, I found the hospital parking lot, parked, and made my way through the maze to find the front door of the hospital. So I walked in. Hospitals are complicated in Austin, but I followed what felt right, and I hoped that I would find someone who would tell me where I could find Susie or Dick, her husband. I made my way up the front steps, and I walked through the front entrance. There, about 20 feet away from me, stood Dick, Susie's husband, immobilized, frozen in time. Our eyes met. He walked toward me. He wrapped his arms around me so tight and said, "Oh my God, I am so glad to see you." And then it was quiet. Silence. All I could feel was what seemed like the weight of the world being transferred to my body. All the fear, all the anxiety, all the helplessness, all of it. I wasn't doing anything, just being there and letting God work through me, letting him feel God's love for him and letting him know that he wasn't alone. Well, it took several years and a lot of prayer group sharing to get to the point where I'm coming closer now to understanding what deepening my relationship with God is about. That encounter with Dick Stone was a defining moment for me, and it took time to process. As John 17 tells us, Christ was in this world, but wasn't of this world. I should be here in this world to make a difference, a positive difference, a Christ-like difference. In this world, I would experience all the things in this world: pain, death, joy, loss, hurt, difficulties, and friendship, just as I was doing with Dick Stone that day in the hospital. But I was not of this world at that moment. I was letting God work through me for Dick to feel that not only I, but also God was there to help carry the burden of whatever lied ahead. I was there to share and support the difficulties and pain of that moment in time. This is how I come to know Christ and deepen my relationship. I am reaching out to another world for guidance, love, support, and experience as I move through the events of being in this world. When I encounter any of these worldly experiences, God is there. Just like Christ knew God was with him when they mocked him, betrayed him, and when they celebrated him. And yes, Christ also ask God, just like I do, if possible, can you take this cup from me? I said more than once as I was driving to the hospital, why me? Jesus answered, why not you? Our prayer group is currently living through and with many of life's difficulties. Several of them are getting their own experience that life is temporary and difficult. One of our members has a condition where her throat grows closed, and it takes surgery to open it by removing built-up scar tissue. She's come close to death on several occasions. 3 others, including my husband, are each dealing with different types of cancer. We've had several prayer meetings where we sat in silence as tears welled up in our eyes. But each time, we've come to realize that God is with all of them and all of us. Each of them continues to tell us how their experiences have brought them closer to God and how they have moved to becoming less of this world and more into the next. They have been example to me of how to be in this world, but not of this world. What we read from Scripture is that the apostles did indeed miss Christ and did mourn his death. So much so that they hid for several days in the upper room, afraid to venture out without him. And it wasn't until Pentecost, when the Holy Spirit was sent to be with them, that they felt able to go out among the crowds. Even today, people pray that they wish they could see Christ, touch Christ, experience a miracle, or that he would come down to earth and be with them so that they could really believe. How long should we wait for our own Pentecost experience? In learning about Christ's ways, I've learned that he is with us all the time. I don't need to place my hands in his wounds to know that he exists. If I'm working towards knowing all I can know about Christ, I should be able to be Christ to others when they need help in their lives. Today, I don't have to look for excuses to not be there when asked. I look for places where I can be there to bring Christ to others. I'm ready to wrap my arms around someone hurting, hospital or not. I'm waiting to celebrate the joys that are part of life's journey, such as being in the hospital room to see the birth of a grandchild. And then there's the sorrows, when I just sit in silence with someone who's feeling alone in their suffering. Have you ever got up in the morning and asked God what you could do to make him happy today? Have you given yourself time to listen to God and know what you're being called to do, rather than what you'd like to do? I've found that that's a great way to start my day. It helps me to open my mind and heart to all that's possible beyond by any idea of what could happen. Recently, I watched the movie Noble. It's a true story about the life of a woman named Christian Noble, who grew up with a lot of difficulties as a young kid in Ireland. And she began a little practice of having chats with God throughout the day. And Susie used to like to do that. Susie would oftentimes pick up all of her books, and you'd see her and she'd say, "Oh, I'm going over to have a little chat with God today. I've got some things going on in my mind that we need to talk about." But during those chats, this Christian Noble discovered that her destiny really lied in the streets of Vietnam, a long ways from Ireland, helping the disadvantaged communities and children in that area of the world. There is no doubt after watching that movie that just like Padre Pio, people missed Christian Noble when she was gone. Not just her children and the usual people we think of suffering a loss when someone close dies. This is a large group of people missing her. People she probably didn't even know, but were helped because of her work in Vietnam. This is a wonderful movie about listening to God and knowing where God is calling you. God isn't calling all of us to some of these magnificent tasks, but Maybe he is. And how do you know for sure? During the last several years, I have spent more time listening to God and trying harder to be in a relationship with him, working on listening, which is not always an easy task for me. But during one of my chats with God, I felt like he was calling me to do more than just help with CEW weekends, being a mime, serving on the pastoral council, and other various tasks within the parish. After several conversations with another couple from our prayer group, we created a blog. I set up the blog, and we've been writing blogs, reflective articles and scripture insights, and then working on sharing them on the site, and it's called livingthechristianexperience.org. I've also set up a Facebook page by that same name, and then some of the blogs are posted to that page. A couple months ago, we started talking about the need for more evangelization beyond the writing. Maybe a faith-centered coffee house, something that provided maybe a meeting space, some learning space where people could come together and share their stories over a cup of coffee, maybe take a class, obtain spiritual direction, maybe even do yoga, who knows? It's an idea that's still percolating. A month ago at work, one of our members came in to meet with me and said, "We need to find a way to build affordable housing here, and I think we can make it happen." I immediately focused on the word "we." I said, well, okay, let's talk about it. Meetings are taking place, and maybe we will get some affordable housing built, a project that is greatly needed. Books have been written on the memories of Christ and how he impacted the apostles and all those who came close to him. He even had Peter walking on water. I would say that's making yourself pretty memorable. But where am I today? Not quite ready to walk on water, but my faith has grown since those early days, and most of it due to lots of reading, our prayer group, and just doing. And also a big dose of listening as to where God wants or needs me. And when I say this, sometimes I think of my brother one day when we were talking about listening to God, and he was wondering about what's a personal relationship with God, and I told him, I said, well, you need to be listening. I said, you need to be quiet, and you need to see what God's saying to you or talking about to you, and those things might help you in deepening your relationship. And his comment back to me was, he said, I don't think I want to hear from God. He said, as I've read a lot about the saints and their lives, and I don't really want God asking me anything like he's asked those people. And I said, well, you just never know. I said, but you got to start listening somewhere. But I've learned that God doesn't ask us to do anything that we won't be given the tools and etc. to also make it happen. I didn't have a clue how to build a blog, but it happened. I still look at it and wondered, wow, how did that happen? But it's here. So will you miss me when I'm gone? Will this be your mantra after tonight? The spark that leads me to focus on this statement came from someone at work. But will we be missed from work for more reasons than just someone else had to do my job while I was gone? A few months back, a friend of mine from Texas, her name was Marcy, came down with lymphomic cancer. Her dad died of the same cancer also. We became really good friends over the years of my time spent in Texas, and mostly because she was from Iowa. And so consequently, we really enjoyed getting together and sharing Iowa stories. She had a really great real estate business in Georgetown, and she was a very successful broker. And at her funeral, when she died, were endless stories from others about how she had impacted their life, how she was an amazing mentor, how she was such a great advocate for all sorts of things. She was a cheerleader for the businesses of Georgetown. She would bring new businesses in and help them try to succeed. She was a spokesperson for this. She was a great mother. She was a great grandmother. She was a great friend. She was a great teacher. They went on and on and on about her being a wonderful mom. No one mentioned that she was a realtor. Marcy is missed. There are still Facebook posts being posted on her page from people as to how she impacted their life, almost 7 months past her death. Pictures of her having fun with her friends, pictures of her helping someone do different things, pictures of her supporting and helping other people, and most of all, pictures of her loving life. I miss her smile, her strong opinions, and her extreme interest in people, and her willingness to help people, anytime, anywhere. She fought to live, but when she knew life was over, she posted that day on Facebook, "Today, I'm going home." I miss her, and I mourned her death. Will they miss me because I cared about them? Because I shared who I am with them? Sure, I hope my kids and husband miss me, some friends maybe. But will people I don't even know miss me? Will I be louder in death than in life? Will I listen to God and trust in His ways to follow Him? Will I get out of the boat and actually walk on water? A few years ago, I heard this song on the radio, and it's called "You're Gonna Miss Me When I'm Gone." I didn't really think about it in the context of living the Christian experience at that time, but it really came back to me as I was talking about this talk and getting ready to do it. And I think each of you were given a solo cup when you came in, and Kathy is going to play the song for us, because I thought it might be fun, as a fun way to end our time here tonight, because I always think it's nice to have something to kind of remember, things that were talked about and ideas that were shared, and to also be able to kind of reflect on some of those things. Because as I said, this whole idea of "will you miss me when I'm gone" has been obviously percolating a long time, since the almost 30 years ago that I heard it here at Nativity first, and then heard it again at work. So this is why I sometimes like to have something to help us remember that. And so Kathy, I believe, is going to help us play the song. And get your cup out. And if you know the song, you can sing along with the cup. I never got very good at being able to do all the motions of the song and those kinds of things. If some of you have seen the movie Pitch Perfect in there, you've probably seen it in there with it and some of those things. How's the technology? Can you hear it? Yeah, that's not too bad. Once in a while, these songs come on the radio, and when the songs come on the radio, it reminds us of a situation or a place we've been in or something we've been doing or of that sort, and that's why I think it's nice to have that connectedness in here to those things. So I hope you take those home with you. I hope you use those to remind you of that, because I let that phrase run through myself and wash over me so many times about wondering, will people miss me? And miss me for what reasons? You know, what is really the things that I'm doing? Granted, we're not all called to build big hospitals. We're not all called to take trips out somewhere, but what is God calling us to do? What types of things does God have in mind for us? And most of all, what are we doing to build that relationship so that we are not of this world? What are we doing to not be of this world? but to be in this world. What are we doing? We don't want to be of it. We just want to be God to other people. We want to know that we're really working to have our heavenly time with God and to go there. And that to be able to do that, we learn more and more not to be so involved with everything that's going on here, but to be focused on the fact that God's with us. God's with us in all of those moments, good, bad, indifferent, and whatever they are. And if we're doing those things, I think everybody's going to miss all of us when we're gone, right? All right. And thank you. It was fun to be with you.